Just break into the panel discussion. I wanted to start with left to right. Tony, please introduce yourself and tell us about your hopes or fears.
All right. I'm Tony Donaldson. I'm the editor of Electric Bike Action magazine, and no real fears other than the fact that, like everybody else, want to make sure that the land managers know that EMTBs are not damaging to trails any more so than a regular mountain bike per the EMBA survey. Hopes is that more people get a chance to ride them. I mean, hardcore cyclists sometimes poo-poo them, but until you've actually thrown a leg over, you don't know. And I think the more people get to know it, the more people are going to be on two wheels, and the better off we all are. I mean, it's great for mountain biking, it's great for commuting, it's great for everything. North America is still trying to figure out what we want to be and what we want to do with it. So that's less than 2 minutes.
Good job. Thank you.
Alrighty. My name's Patrick Traylor. I work for Jenson USA. We're a primarily online retailer, and we're kind of dabbling into the e-bike market right now. I guess our hope for it is that it'll open up a new section of customers to get into cycling. You know, like there's people out there that just can't keep up on like rides we did today. We have a tendency to kind of scoff at EMTB because it's not so much designed for riders like us. I think it's designed a little more for the more casual recreational rider. And I guess the fear would be our inability to explain what they actually do on the trails and address the issues that encounters between traditional cyclists and hikers and everything. So I think that's the biggest thing is that we need to be able to tackle those fears and address those issues before it's widely accepted. So.
Brian Riepe, I'm the editor of Mountain Flyer magazine, and Mountain Flyer is really geared towards, you know, the more hardcore side of the sport, and the riders that I don't believe are the ones, you know, looking at e-bikes as being an option. I'm sure there's a small, you know, overlap, but, you know, I think we really write for the riders that have learned the skills, and they're out there riding every day to get fit so that they can mountain bike. So they're not interested in an e-bike. They don't need the assistance. They want the challenge. But you know, with that, my hopes and fears with it is, you know, I see where they fit. I see where there's a purpose, and I think that, you know, my hopes are that they do what the industry and what the advocates of e-bikes say they're going to do, and they bring more people outside, and they open up mountain biking to people that, you know, have a, you know, reasons that they couldn't mountain bike, that they have physical limitations that would keep them from it. You know, I know an 80-year-old man in Gunnison who came in to buy an e-bike at the local shop because all his riding buddies are 60 and he can't keep up with them anymore. And that's awesome, you know, like all the respect in the world for that guy, and I'm glad that he can get out. And we're very lucky in Gunnison where I live. Almost all the trails are motorized trails, so it's not an issue at all. You can do anything you want out there. And there's motorcycles and there's mountain bikers, and they all get along, and the e-bikes are going to fit right in without a problem. My fear is that there are a lot of areas where trail access is not as easy as it is where I live, and it's been, you know, mountain bikers have worked for years to gain access in places, and the e-bikes, you know, pose a risk of you know, changing the sport in a way that it's not going to be friendly in those areas. If you have state parks and where they're already having issues with, you know, people riding too fast down trails, and I think, you know, most of the e-bike users won't have the ability to go that fast, and there's limitations on the speeds. But you know, a couple of buddies of mine in Gunnison, we had a specialized Levo in the shop, and we were just joking around. We said, let's see if we can hack this thing, and we got online, and 5 minutes later we had, had an app that we could override the settings and change the wheel size, and we were going 40 miles an hour down the street on the thing, and then it was fun. And my fear is that people are gonna adapt them so that they can go faster. There's gonna be aftermarket out, there you can get more powerful motors. And I know myself, if I go ride that thing on these trails around, that are moto trails, first thing I'm going to want is more power and more speed, and I'd be the guy adapting that thing to go faster, and people are going to do it. There's going to be e-bikes out there. They're going to be basically small motorcycles, light, fast motorcycles. So that's my fear.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Next question is, let's say some future scenario, a few years down the road, Sedona says, we're going to open up our trail system to e-mountain bikes. How do you think that should be managed to reduce trail user conflict?
Coming from Southern California, we don't really see too many of them out there right now, so I'm not too sure of the issues that are even arising right now. But I think a lot of it's just responsibility in the rider. You're really getting gains from going uphill. So as you're using a multi-use trail, you kind of have to take into consideration that there's people coming down the trail as you're going up. In terms of controlling it, I don't know. I think that's one of the fears that I mentioned is how do we set the rules, and I think that's something we still have to figure out.
You can go left, you can go right.
I'm also in Southern California, and I see a fair number of them. I've run into a bunch of people, and then I get in conversations with people that are riding traditional mountain bikes all the time, and a lot of times I end up stopping and like letting them try it, and you see the little light bulb go off. As far as if that scenario plays out in Sedona, I don't know. Are there that many problems with people going too fast on e-mountain bikes? I mean, are there reports of that actually happening, or is that just a fear? Are there actual practical things? I mean, I know in Northern California, I've heard that they're actually clocking people on trails and writing tickets for that, but I don't think that's e-mountain bikes. I think that's just mountain bikes, and that's mostly people descending. So I don't see it that much of a problem. Nobody's going 20 miles an hour up a hill, even on one of these. You're going 13, 14 maybe. Maybe you're going twice as fast as somebody on a traditional bike, but I don't see that there's that many issues with it. So.
Ryan, how do you think it should be managed?
Well, I'm not talked 2 minutes. Is she okay? As far as management, I mean, just knowing how BLM and Forest Service works on those things, a lot of times it comes down to that it's hard for them to have the manpower to do that, and I think to police something like an e-mountain bike, they're going to have challenges, even if they put limitations on, well, you can only have a motor that's this powerful, and you have to have a limiter on it that it can only go this fast. They're not going to be able to actually enforce that, and I think that's going to be something the Forest Service or BLM will probably look at on case by case basis with certain trail systems that and I think here, like you're saying, I don't think a motor, no matter how powerful it is, you're probably not going to be able to ride this stuff that much faster because it's so tight and technical. Other areas it might be a bigger problem, and they're probably just going to be certain trail systems that are not going to be open and others that are. But how they would manage that, it would take manpower, and they don't have it. So that's not really. I don't know how they would address that and how they would separate that from is it a different thing than a mountain bike? Is an e-bike a different category, or are they going to consider it the same as a mountain bike? And that's where I think a lot of the mountain bikers are going to be like, wait, we don't want to be considered the same thing, because if you close it to e-bikes, you're going to close it to mountain bikes too, and they don't want that. They don't want to lose trails because all of a sudden their sport has changed into something it wasn't originally intended to be.
I wanted to provide our Bosch answer to that question, and the answer to that question: how should user conflicts be reduced between e-mountain bike riders and mountain bike riders? I think the answer is right here. And does anybody know what this is? What it represents? It's a sticker, that's right. You can put it on your refrigerator or on your car. I'll give you one later. What it is it's a sticker that describes what a Class 1 e-mountain bike is. And as an industry group, Bosch and Trek and many others, what we're trying to do is define Class 1 throughout the US and show how it differs between Class 2 and Class 3 e-mountain bikes. And what this does is it shows what a Class 1 e-mountain bike is. Does anybody know what the definition of Class 1 e-mountain bike is? Jude?
No throttle.
Pedal assist. No throttle allowed. What about wattage?
250 watts.
750 watt limit. But you're close. What about the speed? 20 miles per hour. That's all it is. That's Class 1. Pedal assist that cuts out at 20 and no more than 750 watts. And what we think and what we're pushing for is that Class 1E mountain bikes have the same rights and responsibilities as mountain bikes on trails. That's our goal. That's our hope. Do you think that's right, or is that the wrong approach? Anybody like to address that?
Some of it comes back to what he was saying about modifications. How can you modify this? And I think a lot of it does come down to personal responsibility and how you act on a trail. How do you hold people accountable for that? I guess maybe the local groups. I don't
know. If you have a Ferrari, you can actually drive it 200 miles an hour, but not legally. So, I mean, the legal issue, I mean, it's an enforcement issue. I think it describes it well. I think it gives everybody a starting point as to where everything should, like what the limit should be. And I think if everybody can agree on that, I think that's a good thing. As far as enforcing it, some of it has to be self-policing within the community. So people have to, we all have to talk to each other and make sure that nobody's going out and doing something stupid. But I think it's the hooligans that are going to go out and do something that's going to get them in trouble that may actually bring attention to it. But I'm still not hearing that much of it because they've been hackable for a long time. So I'm not seeing that much of it, but I'm not saying it's not possible. So.
Yeah, I guess, it goes back to my original concerns where I think, first of all, when you different land managers, whether it's state parks or Forest Service or BLM, we can all come up with this plan and saying, okay, great, we've got this Class 1 thing, and here's what we're going to consider part of mountain biking. We want you guys to recognize that as a mountain bike. And the Forest Service is going to say, well, guess what? We don't have the staff to be out there checking your bikes and making sure they've got 750 watts of power, and this trail system's pretty crowded and busy, and you mountain bikers are just getting out of hand. You've got motors now. We're just going to close it to bikes because that's the easiest thing for us to do. And the Forest Service does those kind of decisions all the time, where they decide not to permit something because they're like, oh, we're just too busy. We don't have the staff. We don't have the budget. We're done. And that's going to be case by case thing, and I don't think it's necessarily a question of like how many people are actually hacking the bikes and going faster. It's a perception, and mountain bikes are already perceived by a lot of other user groups as being the troublemakers and being out there when they're hiking. When you ride past somebody who's hiking and we're going 12 miles an hour, they think we're going really fast, and they step off to the side. How many times have I come up on a hiker and startled them, and they jump off the trail like I'm gonna hit them, and I'm on the brakes going like, I'm sorry, but it's I think most of the I guess myself at least, I can't speak for others, what I'm worried about is that perception of mountain biking changing to where it develops into that, well, now mountain bikes are now this motorized thing, so you want to be considered non-motorized, and where we draw the limits of how powerful a motor or anything, I don't think is going to be something that those people consider, and it's those people that we need to worry about. I don't think this is a problem that, whether, hardcore mountain bikers think e-bikes are lame or not. The other mountain bikers aren't going to be the ones saying we don't want e-bikes on the trails. It's going to be the hikers, and those are the people that you have to convince, and they're not easy to convince. So most people that are worried about it are just scared that we're going to lose ground because all of a sudden our sport has changed.
Okay, this is the part where we open it up to the audience. First question from Brett.
Or response.
I see, I hear what you're saying, Brian, and I think that, we run into that issue constantly with trail access, but I think it also boils down to, the mountain bikers and their ability to organize and to communicate and work with trail access and work with, to kind of create that friendship between the land managers. And I think, my question to Bosch would be, how much effort are they willing to put forward, and some of these other bike companies willing to put forward to educate land managers and other people in the community that it is just a mountain bike, but also how could that positively affect, like if all of a sudden there's all this money going back into trail access coming from Bosch, coming from Trek, because it opens up a new avenue for the community, then I could see it actually as a positive, because all of a sudden, it's one more category where people are willing to organize, and nothing like, corporate America getting organized to, essentially positively affect, trail access. And I guess that would be, and I think that Bosch already is doing that, right? They're already lobbying and talking to government officials about this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, it's a valid point. And yeah, Bosch, together with the Bike Product Supplier Association and People for Bikes, we've got this big joint initiative, and everybody throws into the pool of money, and we have two components of it. One component of this advocacy work is on pavement side, and then the other component is on the trail access side. And we're working with land managers. Last month, right before the Sea Otter Classic, we were attending the California Trails and Greenways Conference, and we did demos with land managers, the California state parks, and the people that manage all these state parks throughout California. And we just let them ride Class 1E mountain bikes, just so they understand what they're all about and what they're not. And yeah, we are working together and pooling our resources to improve trail access, which hopefully doesn't just benefit e-mountain bikers, but it'll benefit mountain bikers as well. Questions? Okay.
Which is really interesting, because if there's a guy or if there's an idiot on a bike or on an e-bike, it's not the problem of the e-bike or the bike, it's the problem of the idiot. So it's really the social thing behind it. So an idiot on a bike or an e-bike or in a car, he's going to speed anywhere. And I think that's the biggest problem we have with that issue right now. So e-bikers can speed, or mountain bikers on an e-mountain bike can speed. Normal bikers can speed on the downhill. There's no big difference. And I think educating those people is the biggest thing. And that's the thing we all have to do, not only mountain bikes, but also e-mountain bikers.
Any other questions or comments?
Along with the education piece, it's often brought up of like who's responsible. I've worked at shops. Many people here have worked at shops. We've all sold mountain bikes. Do you teach the person who's buying that mountain bike trail etiquette? Do dealers need to start taking responsibility for selling something to a consumer and educate them on mountain bike or an e-bike? Like, who's going to hold them responsible? Should they be held responsible? Or are we just concerned that, they're selling bikes and getting people out on the trail? Because I know Bosch is a company, Trek, all the brands here could help that and do the education, but we got to start at the ground level too, because shops are just selling stuff and then letting people loose. It's the same thing. I lived in Park City. People would rent mountain bikes in Deer Valley, which is pretty treacherous, has a World Cup downhill course, and it's like, all right, there's the mountain, go ride the trail and come down, with not much education. So it's this kind of double-edged sword where they want to make money, but when will they become responsible for the product that they're selling? And should they be held? Or is that part of, the industry, media included? Like, how do we educate everyone? It's kind of a question for everyone too, and just a comment.
Maybe a retailer? Patrick?
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be figured out. Like I was saying earlier, I think the e-bike customer is going to be a little bit different customer than our normal customer. So I don't know if the retail channel is going to be exactly the same as it is now. I'm not sure you're going to be able to sell a normal full suspension bike the way that you're able to sell an full suspension bike. There might be a little bit more of a learning curve because, like I said, it's probably going to be a little bit more of a casual user, someone who's coming in and asking more questions about what it is and where you can actually ride. So yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a need for retail to figure out how to educate those customers in terms of where they can ride and support the cause. So
with my thoughts on it all, and coming from, like I said, where I am, all the trails are motorized, so we don't feel that pinch. And I guess, why is it so important to Bosch to be classified as non-motorized?
I can answer that question.
I mean, besides the numbers, but
Why is it so important for us to be classified as non-motorized?
Where I live is a former suburban forest that's become an urban forest. And we have huge pressure in terms of the user groups that are already there. We have no motorbikes, there's no motorized traffic, period. We have a lot of hikers. They use trails the mountain bikers have built, but it's a shared resource. We've gotten to the point now that a lot of trails are being signed one way in order to reduce some of those conflicts, which is an issue with e-mountain bikes because they can climb a lot of the trails that have been signed one way. And we have a lot of people who've invested a lot of time in keeping access for mountain bikes and growing access for mountain bikes. And for e-mountain bikes, for most of the land managers, because the land managers there work really, I can just get up and talk.
Yeah, just get up and talk.
So because the land managers work really closely with the mountain bike associations that are already there, and because people on the mountain bike associations have done a lot of advocacy work to get regular mountain bikes accepted, those people don't want companies like Bosch piggybacking onto the back of the advocacy work we've already done. So where Bosch talks about and Trek talks about the money they're spending in advocacy, that money's being spent advocating to land managers and advocating to government. It's not being spent advocating to the trail associations and the people like myself who've done a lot of work to get that access to begin with. And we're worried about e-bikes being piggybacked onto the work we've done. And so when land managers come to us, we present the same challenge as the inverse of the challenge you've presented, which is who's going to be out there? You have no budget. Who's going to police if it has a throttle or no throttle? Who's going to police the slippery slope? And so what happens is, by being categorized as a regular mountain bike, when land managers in urban forests like mine say no motors period, by being categorized as a mountain bike, they can go, it's not a motorized bike, it's a mountain bike.
Maybe I didn't phrase the question right.
Sorry.
Really, I'm saying, why not accept it as motorized and say, like, there's lots of motorized trails where you can ride these?
Because where I am, those shops would never be able to sell those bikes because there's no motorized trails anywhere where I am. And yet, like, we have one of the biggest Turbo Levo dealers in Canada. They're selling Turbo Levos out the door and not having, like we were saying, they're not having that conversation about where you can and can't ride it, because technically, right now, legally, you can't ride it anywhere. So,
I think the other thing too is that on an e-bike, e-mountain, you're reaching the speeds that you would on a motorized trail. So you're kind of like throwing someone on an e-mountain bike, and granted they could be uneducated, they don't have the skill, and now you're putting them on a motorized trail, but they're going to get buzzed by someone doing 30, 40 miles an hour on a moto.
Right. Yeah. So our Bosch
trails all the time, and I don't get buzzed with motorcycles.
So our Bosch perspective is that these are human powered, and that the power that they give you is not much higher than what a strong mountain biker could achieve, and therefore it's okay to have them on the same trails and share the same trails as mountain bikers. And to your point, so IMBA World Summit, IMBA is struggling right now financially, and they need more sponsors supporting their work. So last year, Bosch became a gold sponsor of the IMBA World Summit, and it was $20K that they didn't have the year before. So
it's a different perspective because IMBA doesn't really mean anything where I am. It's the Canadian perspective.
Right, Canadian, so. Right, exactly. But to Brett's point, if e-mountain bike companies like Bosch were a newcomer relatively to the bike world, if e-mountain bike companies can bring a tailwind to the advocacy efforts of these mountain bike organizations, maybe it helps access for all mountain bikers. And we're out of time. Ryan.
Well, I was just thinking after Brian and you over there, my friend from NSMB, I forget your name, I'm sorry, we're talking, that I'm kind of along the lines with Brian, with regular, whatever, mountain bikers don't really care if someone's riding an e-bike. However, I mean, if you look at Moore's Law and you extrapolate that where it's technology doubles every year and the price drops in half, I mean, in 10 years, these motors are going to be in our bottom brackets and our axles, and every bike 15 years might have a button for pedal assist, and that kind of goes back to what Brian was saying. Are e-bikes possibly, because of lack of understanding or misconceptions, possibly going to make it a negative thing for all mountain bikes when in the future it's possible all mountain bikes might have that button to add electronic assist, and then they're all the same. So,
depends where you live, right? That's exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. And thank you, everybody, for your interest and your great questions. And special thanks to the panel. You did a great job. Thank you all.